The European Union is built on values, or should be built on values, and this is a common way to define what binds the EU member states together. But also in its external relation, the EU ambition is to protect and to promote those values. But what are these values? In this month program, we are going to ask ourselves what are these values that are binding or should binding EU together, and how does the EU protect and promote in its external relations outside around the world. In this studio this month we have the co-president of the European Parliament Intergroup on Freedom, Religions and Belief, Carlo Fidanza. Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. Nice to meet you.
And of course, welcome back to Tomas Sandell from the European Coalition for Israel. Welcome back, Tomas.
Thank you.
Mr. Fidanza, would you share with us what do you think about these values? What are these values? And overall, what should be these values that are binding together the EU member state? And what is the role of the intergroup of religious freedom in the European Parliament?
So it's not so simple to answer this question, because naturally we know that democracy, tolerance, freedom of press, freedom of belief and so on are the fundamental rights on which also the EU is based. But on a daily basis, when working on the issue of freedom of religion or belief in this parliament, it's not so common to share this view with the other colleagues when speaking about freedom of religion. And I say this because our intergroup, that is a group, a transversal group of members of the parliament from different political groups, different nations, sharing as an objective, in our case, the defense and the protection of the freedom of religion all over the world, outside the EU, and this is not the case. When we try to bring these discussions inside the plenary, inside the commissions, we see some kind of shyness, we can say, because it's not so simple to reaffirm that freedom of religion is a fundamental right, a human fundamental right. And it is, as from the Charter, the international conventions, the United Nations documents, and so on. But when speaking here, it's not so simple to reaffirm it, because we have some kind of relativist ideology. And when speaking about this, it's something like, okay, you are a believer, so it's about religion, so we want to be atheists. But this is a mistake, because what we defend, what we have to protect is also the right to be atheist, to be free to believe what you want, also not to believe. And for this reason, this is a fundamental right. About values in a more general view, I think that we don't have to lose our Judeo-Christian roots that are the fundamental basis of the European civilization. And this is one of the other issues that we have here. So have a formal democracy deprived of values. This is not necessarily something that you have to share in a faithful way. We can say, okay, you have not to go to the church, but you have to recognize that we are sons of this history, sons of these values, sons of this civilization. Also, if you are an atheist, and I think that we are losing this common sense here. And I think that we have to recover it, because when we speak about tolerance, democracy, freedom of press, we speak of this because we are sons of that those values. And I think this is one of the main challenges here in cultural terms.
And why do you think that there is a sort of resistance with some people that they don't want to speak about religions, speak about religious freedom here in the European Union?
Because the religious identity is something that defines us. And in our current society, what defines us is a bit under attack, we can say. It's difficult to speak about family, that is what defines us in terms of personal relationship. It's difficult to speak about national identities. It's something that binds us in terms of members of the same national community. And for the same reason, it's difficult to share your vision, your belonging to the same religious community. Because there is a sort of ideology that is against identities, and religious is one of these identities that are under attack, in my opinion. And I think that this is a mistake, because when you choose to ignore your identity, you are just a perfect consumer in a global market, but there's no difference between an European or an American or an Asian, because if all we are members of the same global market, we are all equal. We can say we are all equal in terms of rights. Yes, in terms of fundamental rights, but we are different. We have our specificities, and that makes us all different one from the others, and this is the richness that we have to protect and defend in our societies, not to have a completely leveled yes. And I think this is the approach that we have here, and that combined with a sort of bureaucratic approach is bringing these institutions to lose part of its soul. And this is our main concern in this moment. And when you are facing also external threats, you have to recognize your roots and your common values, because the others outside have strong and dangerous identities that they use against you, and you have to recognize your roots, to say, okay, we are different from you. You are violent, you are a fanatic, you are a fundamentalist, and we defend our democracy, our freedom, our liberty, because we believe in this. It's not so simple here.
Yes, and that's a very good analysis. Do you share, Thomas, this analysis and how well the European Union, according to you, is defending religious freedom? Is it possible to speak about religions in the European Union?
That's an interesting question. I've been following EU politics, I think now for more than 25, maybe even close to 30 years. And I've also seen an evolution. And of course, we have to take into account when European member states come together, you have to find some common ground. And sadly, I think the French laïcité has been very prevalent in this context, meaning that religion somehow is irrelevant in a way. I share what I hear Mr. Fidanza say. I think these are very valuable observations. On a philosophical level, I would even look at it, you have a macro level, you have a micro level. And of course, the idea of federalism or supranationalism is, of course, you always build from the top. But then you have to ask yourself, what is society based on? And, and it's sad that this would have to be even disputed, that there are certain nucleus in family, in society, which builds up the society from bottom up. And obviously that's where family comes in, and faith for that matter. So I think in order to build sound, healthy societies, we need to build from the bottom up and look at what are really the nucleus of a sound societal structure. And to your second question, sadly, I don't think it's a secret to anyone that the EU has not been a very great defender of religious freedom around the world. And I think the latest example is, of course, that this position of envoy, EU envoy for protecting religious freedom around the world has still not been confirmed. You would know, I think it's more or less 2-3 years that there's been no one on that position, and that raises the question, why is this the case?
There was the Stylianidis, the Greek politicians, for just 6 months.
6 months. Then he became minister in Greece, and now the appointment is again blocked,
of
and
course.
so it's stopped. Yeah.
And I think if the problem is really to find a suitable candidate, I have a short list, so I'll ask the president to contact me, and I'll provide it happily.
Yes, but please appoint him or her. Or her. We are writing letters and letters. The last one today with our colleagues of the intergroup in order to push the commission to do this appointment. It's incredible how they can't.
They don't want to
yes,
appoint.
They are this kind of trouble. And the last candidate has been submitted to a sort of public trial in the Libe committee here in the parliament, accused to be a Christian and to and to have done in his past some declarations defining himself as a Christian. And for this reason, the commissioner stopped and okay, let's be cautious and let's take care of this. And so,
and this exactly
is
is
part of shyness of what
we said
mentioned
before. Yes, this is something, and I think that also some sort of Euroscepticism comes from this, because if you see that you cannot define yourself as a Christian because you are blocked, show how much it's difficult to speak about Christian values in the European Union, and plus you see that the European Union almost is ashamed to define itself with the Christian, Judeo-Christian roots.
And you have also to consider that we have special envoys for many issues. So, the strange thing is that, okay, you have these other envoys, you can't have an envoy for freedom, for religious freedom. So you can have envoy for LGBT rights. Okay, yes, we have it, him, I think, no problem at all. But why can't we defend with a special envoy this kind of human fundamental right?
Marco, if I may add to this discussion, it's interesting the lack of knowledge, first of all, that there seems to be in this chamber of how does a typical Christian look like today? Where is this person from? And I think there's still in the back of their mind this concept from 100 years ago, where the average Christian was white, was from the northern hemisphere. But if you look at the statistics, you look at the growth of the global church, a typical Christian today is black, he's colored, he lives in the southern hemisphere, he's a poor person, most likely, and persecuted. So I think, these are, we are looking at say a Pakistani that just for the fact of having a Christian faith, a faith which is different from the prevalent faith in their society, would be accused of blasphemy. And this is something that the whole chamber should be able to unite against and say this is not right. But I think there's a lot of prejudice still. Perceptions, wrong perceptions.
I agree. I personally went in north of Iraq, in Syria, to report about the persecution of the Christians in the Middle East, and they knew about the role of the EU special envoy. That probably if you go to Italy, no one knows him.
No one.
But in Iraq, in north of Syria, even in Pakistan, of course, after the case of Aisha Bibi, is something that also the European Union can play a soft power in those areas where they have an interest. So it's
this is due also to the good work that Jan Figel did in the past, when maybe in the first moment in which this role was used in order to apply this soft power in those countries. Yeah, it is for sure.
And we discussed about the north of Iraq, Pakistan, etc. And from the intergroup, what are the countries? Can you tell us more about the countries
that you mentioned are naturally among the most critical countries. We published our periodical report a few months ago, in which we mentioned and analyzed the 10 most the 10 countries in which the situation was degrading. Yes, was getting worse in the last years. And I want to mention Nigeria first of all. This is the most critical in this moment, with continuous attacks against churches, against the Christian communities, rape and so on. With difficulty that is major for the presence of two radical groups very active in two different parts of Nigeria, ISWAP on one side side, and most famous Boko Haram on the other side. And the other problem is related to the role of the government, that is not doing so much in the best option. We have also other options saying that they are a bit helping these radical groups. I want to say that they are not doing enough to tackle these radical groups. We saw also in other African countries a few days ago in Cameroon, another church attacked with nuns and priests raped. So we have this part of Africa that's very critical in this moment, and then we have Pakistan and another part of Asia, and Iraq and Syria and so on. And we have naturally the Arabic Peninsula that is critical, Saudi Arabia and Egypt with the Copt minority. So we have very spread situations. And what we have to do in our view as an intergroup is that EU can condition our cooperation agreements, trade agreements and so on with these third countries on the defense and protection of this fundamental right. Okay, we can give you money, support, and our partnership and so on, because this is the only concrete tool that we have together with the soft power. But soft power has to be accompanied with some concrete
otherwise,
tool.
of course.
And this is the only option that we have. Okay, we can support you, but please now if you want our money, our support, you have to protect the religious minorities. And I think that we have to do this with more concreteness and effectiveness.
Yeah, and you mentioned also before, like a sort of prejudice about the Christians that is white, etc. While right now you say that the majority of the Christians are living in the South Hemisphere, etc. So, and do you think that there is also the problem of a sort of narrative that also portrayed the European as imperialist, etc.? In this concept of not being able to reach those countries and to help them and to speak to them to help to respect some rights?
No, absolutely. I think people are still dealing with this, what they consider to be an old imperialistic legacy, and the way they see it was that the Christian faith was part of this legacy, and now they are so sensitive and shy away from in any way trying to be associated with it. But as I said, what I just mentioned is something that anyone who has some knowledge about the global church would subscribe to. But if you would ask here, and it's usually to say, but why should we protect the wealthy Northern Europeans? They are the privileged. But if they would understand, and that's where I think there's really a need for more information, education in this chamber about the situation, if you're a believer, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Iran, in China, in Nigeria. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And these are not the typical, Christian, what they looked like 100 years ago, 150 years ago. So today, to speak out on behalf of those who are persecuted because of their faith, and it's important to say that this is primarily, again, based on statistics, the Christian community. Of course, there are Muslims, be it in China or in other parts of the world, who are persecuted as well, and other religious minorities. So we are not making a distinction, but statistically, these are indisputable facts. But then we have to look at them and say, who are they and what do they look like? And these are poor people. These are people struggling. And I think anyone has a responsibility to help them and stand up for their fundamental freedoms and rights, that were inscribed already in 1948 and 1953. And we should really stick to these values if we want to be a European Union based on values.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if the European Union wants to tell also to other countries, even within the European Union, how to respect certain values, should be the first one to affirm the values even outside. Otherwise, the European Union will lack some part. And Mr. Fidanza also mentioned the Middle East. You are the president, the director of the European Coalition for Israel. How is the situation of the religious freedom in the Middle East? Are those certain countries that are improving or are getting worse?
Yes, of course, we have this interesting development in the Middle East that we've spoken about before in this program, about the Abraham Accords, and I would define it in a simple way to saying there are those countries that are moving in the right direction. They're not there yet, so we should be patient. But then there are other countries that are moving in a completely different direction. And there we need to, this old saying of using a carrot and stick. We need to use our stick. Speaking about Iran, for example, I mean, as we sit here, people are being killed on the streets of Iran, just simply for not covering their faces properly. And I mean, if there's anything we should be able to agree on here in the European Parliament is that we need to speak up. This is not acceptable in the 21st century. And where is the European voice that these Iranians again need to hear from in Brussels? Coming then back to Israel, of course, this is the only country in the Middle East which has a growing Christian population. And again, here, I think for the European Union, it should be important to, if we are a union of values, to say, well, which country in the Middle East share these values, and which countries are the ones which are completely in contradiction with these values. And that also relates to the Palestinian, state, or be it Hamas or be it Fatah, that, when you openly glorify the killing of Jews, when you create a culture of hatred, and we just keep a blind eye, or we look the other way, and we, pass out another 100 million. Come on, is this European values? It's not.
This is another topic where the European Union has his eyes closed, probably is the role with Israel and some extremist factions in Israel.
Yeah, it is. Naturally, we are very concerned about what's happening in Iran. The images that we see every day are terrible, and I think that this is something that adds itself to what we perfectly know. We perfectly not all perfectly know the danger that Iran brings to the security of the Strait of Israel that we want to defend. But naturally, we have ambiguity in many behaviors here in the European institutions. And I think that the role of the Abraham Accords will be very important in that case, because it's something that it's a step in the right direction. It's something that is shaking here the conscience to say, okay, now we can have a different approach towards the Middle East, saying, okay, that can exist a cooperation between Israel and other Muslim states, Muslim-based states, and cooperation towards a better future in respect and agreements and trade and so on. This is a common field that we have to invest on. And I think it's a very good example that the previous U.S. administration gave, pushing for these agreements. So I think that we have to invest more and more our energies as EU in order to do something similar.
We should have promoted the Abraham Accords, for example, using our soft power.
To have this geopolitical role instead of doing lots of bureaucracy here and documents on everything and regulations on everything.
I would continue for hours, but we reached the limit. Thank you very much and see you next month.